Welcome to the AEN Stories channel.
I found the ring dish empty on a Tuesday, which already had too much going for it. Tuesdays are for bills and trash cans and leftover dinners that don't reheat well. They're not for empty ring dishes. Did you take your ring off in the kitchen again? I called to Sophie from the hallway. It came out as a joke, because we used to joke about how she took it off if she was kneading dough or scrubbing the sink, then forgot it near the soap. I did, she said from the bathroom. The blow dryer started up, swallowed anything else. I checked the kitchen, sink rim, window ledge, the chipped blue bowl we call a dish because a wedding blog told us to. Nothing. I checked the little ceramic fox by the stove that holds paper clips and nails, because sometimes we invent new systems without telling each other. Nothing. Where? I asked, dryer off now. On the counter, she said, coming around the corner, towel twisted around her hair. By the cutting board. Evan had friends over, maybe he moved it to make room for pizza? Evan, 15, tall enough now that I catch myself looking up, looked up from his phone at the table. I didn't touch anything, he said, neither defensive nor offended, just telling a fact. It'll turn up, Sophie said. It always does. Sometimes things don't. You don't know which time is the exception until the week goes by and you've crawled on your hands and knees under every cabinet and behind the stove and you've shaken the vacuum canister into a baking tray because someone on YouTube said that's where jewelry hides if the universe likes jokes. By Friday, the house felt like a hell breath. I'd asked Sophie twice more where she'd left it. The second time she said, "Please stop. You're making me feel like a suspect in my own house." I dropped it. I did the thing where you go through the motions of normal, work, dinner, Evan's JV basketball game where he made a layup and smiled in a way that still looks like kindergarten under the edges. But normal had static in it. Saturday morning brought snow, the kind that makes the world quiet for a few hours before plows and politics return. I went outside to shovel the front walk and wave at our neighbor Tom across the street who shovels like it's a competitive sport. The air had that metallic smell it gets when it's cold enough to make you feel like you've done something noble by just existing. Sophie stood in the doorway with a mug. I called Mom, she said. She thinks we should check the car again. We checked twice, I said. Checked 3 times, she said. I want it back. We checked. No ring. I found a French fry fossilized under the passenger seat and a library receipt from June. Sophie found 2 bobby pins and hope for about 6 seconds before it lived and died in her hand. That night she sat on the couch with her knees up under a blanket and scrolled listings on her phone, similar rings, same cut, resale sites with polite lies in the descriptions. I said, "Don't," and she said, "I just want to know what it would take," and I said nothing because the answer was not a dollar amount. By the following Tuesday, the air in the house had a temperature I didn't recognize. I kept catching Sophie looking at Evan's backpack by the door the way you look at a thing you lost hope in. After dinner she said, too brightly, "Evan, you were at the island making sandwiches with Jake and Dylan. Are you sure you didn't move the ring?" Evan said, "I told you," and pushed his plate away and rinsed it and went upstairs the way decent kids go upstairs when they understand that leaving keeps the room from exploding. Wednesday, after school, he stood in the kitchen with tears on his face he didn't wipe because teenagers are too busy surviving to manage optics. "Why does she keep asking me?" he said. "I didn't touch it. I don't care about that. I swear." "I know," I said, and pulled him into a hug that had to ask permission from new inches of his height. "I know." On Thursday, I found the ring. Except it wasn't me. Tom, the neighbor with the competitive shovel, knocked on our door with his hat still on and said, "We found something weird." He held a small Ziploc sandwich bag half full of snow. Inside, at its center, glittering like a bad joke, was Sophie's ring. "Where?" I asked. My voice sounded like a stranger's voice, polite but suspicious. "In our front shrubs," he said. "Under the big boxwood. I would have missed it, but the sun hit just right. Mandy said it looked like a coin and told me to grab it before the kids did." He squinted like retelling the sunlight hurt. "Is it?" "It's hers," I said, and the world slid an inch to the left. Sophie came from the kitchen and stopped when she saw the bag. Her face did that thing where it's both relieved and rearranged. "How could it be there?" she asked. Tom shrugged like a man who didn't come for this conversation. "You tell me," he said kindly. "Look, not my business. We've had break-ins on the other block. I put cameras up last month, cheap ones, but good enough. If you want to check the footage, you're welcome. Sometimes the kids cut across, throw stuff, you know?" Sophie spoke first. "No, it's okay. I probably took the trash out and it fell." She tried the sentence on and it fit like a shirt borrowed from a cousin. I looked at Tom, who looked at the bag. "I'll send you the clips anyway," he said. "In case." Tom left. We put the bag on the counter like evidence from a show we'd mocked together once. Sophie said, "Evan," in a voice that had become a hallway to the place we were now. "Evan, can you come down?" He came. He looked at the ring and at us. His face did the math and then rejected it. "No," he said. "No. I didn't." "Nobody's accusing you," I started, but Sophie cut me off, voice going high and thin like a wire under tension. "Did you go to the neighbors?" she asked. "Did you take it outside? Did you throw it?" He blinked at her like she'd switched languages. "Why would I throw your ring into the snow?" "Because you've been angry," she said. "Because you, teenage boys do dumb things and then they hide it and—" "That's enough," I said, louder than I'd meant. Evan flinched. Sophie looked at me like I'd chosen a side in a war she didn't know she'd declared. "He said no," I said, softer. "We believe him." "Do we?" she asked, and I felt something fail under the floorboards. We sat in a silence that was more like weather than quiet. Evan went back upstairs. Sophie went to the sink and washed the clean glass like it might tell her something if she kept at it. I stood there, hands in pockets, looking at the tiny plastic bag with the ring melting the snow around it, the water collecting like a clock that didn't tick. Tom texted an hour later, "I have the clips. Want me to email?" I typed back, "Yes. Please." I didn't tell Sophie right away. I told myself I was waiting for the right moment, which is a way of saying I was scared of all the wrong ones. In the morning, Evan left for school looking like a boy who'd packed shame he didn't deserve. I made coffee because coffee is a way to say we will continue. Sophie stared at her phone like she could will it to tell a different story. When she went upstairs to shower, I opened Tom's email. There were 3 clips. The thumbnails were identical: our street, night, snow falling in the cone of the porch light. I clicked the first. Midnight stamp. The camera faced the corner where our yards meet, capturing the strip of sidewalk and the space between the hedge and Tom's front steps. The image quality was what you get for $129, which is to say good enough to help a neighbor, not to convict a movie villain. 30 seconds in, the frame picked up movement, a figure coming from our side, hood up, shoulders hunched against cold. I knew the way Sophie moves in a coat. It's in the tilt of the head, the quick adjustment of the sleeve like she's apologizing to fabric. The figure stepped into the shrub's shadow. The camera picked up the edge of a face for a moment, then the telltale hand, left hand, bare, right fingers tugging at the ring on the left. The ring came off with the little shake you do when soap would have made it easy. She held it, looked at it, then turned and tossed it high and lazy into the dark under the boxwood. She stood still another beat, like she'd expected a different sound than the one it made landing in snow. Then a second figure came into frame from the side, taller, a man I didn't recognize at first because recognizing would have been too fast. He stepped close. Sophie stepped closer. They kissed the way people kiss when they think the world is granting them a private moment, which is to say not dramatically, not for show, but with the dull certainty of practice. Then they stepped apart. She said something. He said something. She walked back the way she came. He went up the steps and out of frame. The second clip was shorter. 2 minutes later, Sophie again, alone this time, glancing at the shrub, then back across the street, then returning to our side with steps that tried to say they belonged to someone else. The third clip was nothing but snow. I sat there and watched them again because my brain didn't believe the first time. On replay, I watched for details as if details could unmake it: the coat, her red one with the torn pocket we planned to fix and didn't, the scarf I bought her at the craft fair last year, The boots that make her taller and make her steps sound like punctuation. It was Sophie. It was our neighbor's porch. It was snow. I forwarded the email to myself, then to a folder with no name. I closed the laptop when I heard the shower stop. I poured more coffee and looked at the Ziploc bag on the counter with the ring resting now in a shallow puddle, light catching the stone and making it do its trick, pretend the world is full of points of light. Sophie came back down, hair damp, face blank in the way people make when they're tired of their own face. "Any news from your mom?" she asked, because sometimes conversations are detours until they aren't. "Tom sent the clips," I said. "No detour today." She went still, then sat, then stood again, like a person in line who realizes she's not ready for the clerk. "Do we have to?" she asked. "I watched them," I said. "You should too." She stared at the table for a long moment, then nodded. "Evan?" "He's at school," I said. "We'll talk to him after." She sat at the kitchen table with a laptop. I pressed play on the first clip. I stood a few feet away because the distance felt like a kindness we both didn't deserve and desperately needed. She watched herself walk into the frame. Her hand went to her mouth as if seeing her own movements required keeping something from falling out. When the man appeared, she made a small sound I'd only ever heard when she burned herself on a pan. When they kissed, she looked away, and then she looked back like the screen owed her the decency of fading to black. When the clip ended, she didn't speak for a full minute. Then she said, "I told myself I threw it there because I was angry at you." "At me?" I asked, not because I wanted to make a list of my sins but because the logic mattered. "You keep score," she said, carefully, like she was describing a complicated recipe. Not out loud. Not with points. With favors. Shoveling. Groceries. The way you load the dishwasher like only you know how. I felt like the ring was part of that. Like every time I took it off you saw it. And I wanted to do something that didn't belong to your system. "You kissed him," I said. It wasn't a question. She nodded. "I did." "Who is he?" "Jason," she said. The name fell to the floor like a dull coin. "From 2 houses down. Mandy's brother. He's been staying with them since the fall." "And Evan?" I asked. "You said he?" I panicked, she said, and there it was, the sentence that solves nothing. "He was there. He had friends here. I thought if it was him, I could fix it. I could be mad for a day, and then it would be over, and the ring would be back, and we'd make a joke about teenagers and boundaries." She closed her eyes. "I'm so sorry." "I'm glad we have footage," I said. "Because if it was only your words, I don't know what I'd believe." It came out more honest than I wanted. We called her parents. You don't have a choice about some audiences. They came over with their usual choreography, her mother, Susan, bringing pastries no one would eat, her father, Jack, bringing the kind of quiet that enters a room before he does. Sophie told them. Jack sat in the chair by the window and stared at his knees like they had counsel to offer. Susan reached for her daughter's hand and then pulled back like the table was hot. "We can get help," Susan said, like help was a product she could buy on the way home. "We will," I said. "But first, Evan." He came home at 3:15 with snow on his shoulders and that slump boys put on, like armor or apology. He dropped his backpack and saw the room, his grandparents, the laptop, the bag with the ring, and did that brave thing where kids ask exactly the question that matters. "What happened?" Sophie spoke before I could. "I lost my ring," she said, voice shaking but unwilling to drop the work. "I told you I left it in the kitchen." "That wasn't true. I threw it in the snow across the street. You didn't do anything wrong. I accused you, and that was wrong. I'm sorry." Evan looked at her for a long few seconds, as if to verify the speaker. Then he looked at me, then at his grandfather, whose jaw was set in an angle I've only seen during storms. "Why?" Evan asked. "I wanted to hurt your dad," she said. "And I wanted to pretend the hurt came from somewhere else." She took a breath. "And I was with someone I shouldn't have been with." Evan's face went very still, then very red. He nodded in a way that said he didn't trust his mouth. He turned and walked up the stairs, every step a drumbeat. A minute later, his door closed. Susan started to say something, the kind of something mothers say to make daughters small again when small feels safer, but Jack put a hand on her arm. "No," he said. "Let him be." He looked at me. "I'm sorry," he said. It was the most generous thing anyone said that day. Jason didn't come by. He must have figured out that he was in a movie where the villain knows better than to ring the front bell in the third act. He did send a text to Sophie that said, "I'm sorry for the fallout." She put the phone face down, then slid it to me. I blocked the number, not because that fixes anything but because removing a door that shouldn't exist is still carpentry. The next day, we went to a counselor, Mara, 2 towns over because we needed anonymity like a cast needs stage lights. Mara did not let Sophie be only sorry or me be only angry. She gave Evan a separate appointment and told us to stop using him as a mirror for our righteousness. She said sentences like, "Accountability is not a performance," and, "Transparency is the road, not the destination." I wrote them down because writing things down is a way for me to feel like a person who takes care. We also walked across the street and thanked Tom. He stood on his stoop like a man who did not ask for the role of messenger. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't want to be in your business." "You weren't," I said. "We made it your business when we made it the whole street snow." Mandy came out with a kid on her hip and a look that tried for neighborly and landed on sorry. "Jason's gone," she said. "We asked him to leave." I'm sorry." "Me too," I said, because sorry is the only currency that spends in both directions when the bank is out of cash. At home, Sophie moved into the guest room because names matter and so do doors. Evan ate at the table but spoke less, which felt like a tax collected by the state. He went to basketball and to school and to the basement sometimes to lift the small weights we bought during the pandemic because Hope is heavy and likes to be held. I found myself at the sink at odd hours, looking out at the shrubs across the street as if they were a confession booth. I thought about all the moments in the last year when I'd seen Sophie make a new motion with her coat, a new pause at the door, a new patience with her hair. You can rewrite any past with new information if you're not careful. It turns into revenge disguised as insight. Chloe, no, not Chloe, different story. Evan came down one night while I was at the sink with a glass I didn't need. He stood with his hands in his pockets and said, "Are you leaving?" in a voice that wanted the answer to be no but had prepared for yes. "I don't know," I said, because it's the only honest line left some days. "I know we're going to slow down. I know your mom is going to stop seeing him. I know we're going to a counselor. I know you don't have to take care of either of us." He nodded, the kind of nod boys learn from watching men do pretend agreements. "Okay," he said. Then, after a beat, I didn't touch the ring. "I know," I said. "I'm sorry anyone made you say it twice." Winter stayed a while. The ring came back from the jeweler polished and resized because the stone had a loose prong and the metaphor was too on the nose to ignore. Sophie wore it sometimes to counseling because Mara said she needed to sit with what it meant to choose to be married in the rooms where we were reframing what married meant. Sometimes she left it in the dish, and I didn't ask where else it had been. The footage lives on a drive in a drawer I don't open unless I need to remind myself that shame likes to invent new stories. I don't watch it. Knowing it exists is both a sentence and a reprieve. At the end of February, the snow melted in a way that made gutters complain. I shoveled the last of it into small hills like I still had a say. Tom waved his shovel at me from across the way. The shrubs by his steps looked like shrubs again. Ordinary. A place to lose and find things, to hide and be seen, to kiss and be caught. I don't have a neat ending. I have the present, which is a house where we keep the lights warmer now and the doors a little more honest. Sophie texts me when she's leaving work and I believe her because she sends a photo of the parking lot, and if that's how trust has to look for a while, then fine, let it wear a coat. Evan still keeps his backpack by the door, and I don't look at it like a suspect, I look at it like a declaration. Here lives a kid who shouldn't have had to prove himself to the people who taught him how to talk. Sometimes, late, the street is quiet and the snow makes its temporary truce with the world, and I think about rings and cameras and shrubs that don't care what we do under them. I think about the second clip, the one where she came back alone and checked if the ring was visible, and I think about how ordinary her steps looked. Like anyone else's. Like mine. Then I take out the trash and put the dish back by the sink and go to bed in a room I am still allowed to call mine, and I sleep the kind of sleep men get when they're not forgiven yet but are still doing the work of staying. We're not fixed. We're not finished. We're here. And for now, that's the only truth I know how to hold without dropping. Thank you for listening my story. If you want more raw, real, and gripping stories like this one, subscribe to the AEN Stories channel. Your support keeps these stories alive.